All right, before we get started, I would like to ask the panelists to introduce themselves by name and also more to the point, what your interests are around AI and LLMs.
Test. There we go. Joe Penna. I am a recovering YouTuber from back in the day. Now a filmmaker. So I've done a few features, outside of like the commercials, music videos, and yeah, for a while I was heading up the applied machine learning team over at Stability AI. So yeah, very well entrenched in both of the worlds we're talking about.
Momo.
Hi, I'm Momo Wang. I'm a director of animation at Illumination Entertainment. We produce the animation film like Minions, Despicable Me, Super Mario Brothers. For my personal project, I use a lot of AI for AI filmmaking.
Hi, my name is Mark Goffman. I'm currently an executive producer of a TV series on NBC and Peacock called The Irrational. Mostly worked in television in my career, from The West Wing to Umbrella Academy and a bunch of stuff in between. And I love playing around with generative AI just for the joy of creation and seeing where it can enhance and fill in some of the gaps in my own skill set.
Great.
Hey, I'm Matt Nix. Showrunner, probably best known for... Better? There we go, yes. Okay. Matt Nix, showrunner, probably best known for a show I created called Burn Notice. Thank you. One person knows it. Yes! You are responsible for my residuals. Done a bunch of shows. Most recently did a show called True Lies on CBS, which none of you saw. Right now I'm doing a bunch of television pilots and some movie stuff. And yeah, for me, I'm just really interested in seeing, I guess I'd say it feels like we're on the verge of the world changing utterly. And I want to be in there seeing it happen rather than just waking up one day and realizing, oh, it changed and I wasn't paying attention.
Well, let's start with you. Tell me a little bit about what you're able to do with LLMs that wasn't possible for you before.
I think for me, weirdly, I think my last show was out of production. We were done like a month before ChatGPT hit the scene, so I haven't really done a whole lot in terms of things that are on the air. I haven't done anything in terms of things that hit the air that have used it. But what I've really been looking at is I've done a lot of experimenting with my own past work. Like, could I write a burn notice? Like, what can I do here? Well, how would it have been useful for this? How would it have been useful for this other show that I did? So the biggest thing that I've found is I tend as a writer to think very structurally. I think a lot about kind of the math of a story and how it works and what's the sort of meta structure of anything that I'm doing, which not every writer thinks that way. I do, and it happens to be really well suited to working with LLMs. And so I had an interesting experience on my last show. I had been writing all of these documents for the writers where I was explaining, this is how you do the show. This is the math of the show. It starts with something like this. This is how the A stories and the B stories will rhyme with each other. This is how all of the story elements will be related. And so I had written out what was essentially, what I realized after ChatGPT came out was a prompt. Right? I was writing it for a writer's room. I was writing it for humans. And then I fed it into ChatGPT and I was like, oh, that's actually quite useful. And so I think the big thing that and if I just asked it to write a story for me, it was terrible. It was totally predictable. But once I gave it a very specific set of instructions and a very specific way to relate all of the elements to each other, I found that really played in very well to the strengths of an LLM. and it was able to generate some really interesting things, which then required a lot of human interaction, a lot of editing, a lot of curating, a lot of rewriting. But in terms of what it could actually generate, it was fascinatingly useful. So, you know, I haven't had the opportunity to use it for something that's going, but in experimenting with things that I used to do, it's been really fascinating to see what it would have been capable of.
Thank you, Mark.
Well, like Matt, I think there's incredible opportunity to actually create a GPT, particularly on GPT. So you can create, you know, a set of instructions and rules that every show has some, whether it's the way the character behaves, the type of worldview it has, generally the shape of an episode and how the act breaks go, how the main two characters interact with each other. And you can feed all of this in, and then, again, we don't use it on the irrational, but just playing around, you can say something like, okay, our main character is a behavioral psychologist, tell me a psychological experiment that's fairly obscure that has a surprising result to it. And it'll spit out a bunch of them. Oh, Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. That's really interesting. That's where people have a different worldview based on the language that they learned growing up. So, that'd be really interesting for a story. Let's dig down more. And maybe 2 more iterations in, I can see how I can relate that specific hypothesis to our main character, very often in the same way that I might do with somebody on staff. Now, big difference is that you can do the research a lot faster, but the other thing is it might be 3 a.m. and my wife's going to punch me in the face if I wake her to talk about any of this. If I try calling anyone, they're asleep, and same thing, I'll get punched the next morning. So a GPT is,
What are you doing in your writers' rooms?
Matt, you should come visit. Yeah.
Clearly not.
But it's always awake, it's endlessly positive and patient with me. And so those are some of the real, benefits and things that you can use. And that's purely in the writing and the creativity part. But the other thing is, I'm a pretty poor artist, and anyone who's seen me draw my stick figure, storyboards knows that. But this is now an incredible gift for me to be able to storyboard out a pretty complex scene and give it to a director or show it to our set designers and say, this is the 1.0 version of what I know you can make significantly better. And that's something that's really, really useful.
What about you, Momo?
Yes, so mainly I see LLM to me is more like a translator and assistant. So I use LLMs to do the research for proposals. Also, because my born language is that's Chinese, so when I first write a story in Chinese and then I translate with LLM to English, which is easier for me and then better than any translation softwares. Also, I can ask questions to level up the story. Also, I find another interesting to use that's I try out. I can get inspiration from different model of LLMs, because the LLM, they are made by human being, but people they are come from different countries, different backgrounds. So the different people train the different models. There are kind of different types. It's kind of like they are LLMs, but they graduate from different schools. So they have a different point of view. Sometimes I just test the same idea, same questions, but I get a different point of view and the resource. Sometimes I feel like, I got some interesting idea from testing that.
That's great. What about you, Joe?
Yeah, right now it does feel like a lot of these AI tools is a little bit like getting blood from a stone. Is that a thing Americans say? I think so.
Yes,
right?
it is.
Okay, good. I'd ask the LLM, but I don't have it with me right now. It is quite difficult because you're trying to go through ChatGPT or Claude or something, or perhaps you're not even doing that. You're going through the API where you can change things like the temperature and you can change the system prompt. But still, people call it nerfed. These models are are at least right now designed in a way where inference isn't the easiest thing to do. And yeah, you can do things like loading in huge amounts of your writing and being like, hey, try as best as you can do this. And now that Llama 3 or whatever is out, like you can fine tune a giant amount of your own scripts. I've done this, like my emails and my things. It gets my spelling mistakes. It like starts to sound a little bit like me. So yeah, right now it's a little bit like having a very eager assistant that is incredibly clever, but sometimes misses like really obvious things, so
Just like the human ones.
just like human, right? Yeah, and eventually it'll learn, so yeah, right now it is much like this, like, hey, I have a 1970s location that I need to be like this and this and that, give me 10 options, and the first 3 are great, and the other 7 is like, well, you didn't even follow my prompt, but hey, the first 3 are great, so it's the beginning of ideas that then you can say, oh, well, that works, and eventually we'll get to a point where enough of thumbs up and thumbs down, it starts getting a little bit closer to what you need.
So one of the things I want to drill down into, and this kind of falls into the explain to me like I'm 5 department, is you talk about like feeding your emails, feeding your scripts, creating a baseline from which to understand. You're basically, you're creating like, you're a custom machine. What is that process? I mean, like literally, how are you? It's like when you say feeding it scripts, we presume it's not like feeding it scripts. It's like, what are you doing? What are you? It's like, are you just uploading a bunch of scripts into what? We've all used ChatGPT, but I personally don't know how I would create a personalized Dana Harris-Bridson version of that.
For a continuing model, you can create. There's a setting, create a GPT, and you can name it whatever you want. My version of Martin Scorsese, and feed it as much information as you want. I mean, there are kind of 2 ways to do it. Like, there's the version of yourself. I'm going to feed it and upload simply, the last 10 scripts I've written, a bunch of pitch documents, my emails, everything else, so that it gets to know me, my style, my writing, and we'll call that like the alt version of me. But then there's what I think is probably more useful to me, and it's more of a collaborator or co-pilot, somebody that doesn't have my exact voice, and that would have to be trained on something else, on other material. So,
yeah, and it can be one of the issues right now is that these tools are kind of all over the place, right? In terms of how easy they are to use, how much you can change them. So it can be as simple as like, you just put a bunch of your scripts into something like Claude or Gemini or ChatGPT, and you say, hey, read this and come up with a few paragraphs about how I write. And then write a system prompt for me. So then it does, and you can tweak it, come up with like some example sentences that I would say, and then that can be your system prompt. And it can be as easy as that, or it can be as crazy as like, you're getting a bunch of H100s on a cloud compute, and you're training your own custom version of it that may or may not be better, and it depends on how you're going to do the chat, because it still has this like chat kind of understanding. So yeah, it can be really, really technical, or at least right now, it seems like ChatGPT or Claude are going to be the case, and they're all good at certain things. I found that like something like Gemini is really good at like, hey, this is I have all of the dialogue that one character says, right? In that voice, I want to say something like this in the story, and she's trying to be duplicitous and use her voice and give me a few options of what she would say. Gemini is the best at that, and then Claude is the best at this other thing, and then ChatGPT is the best, and then ChatGPT just released 4.0, which is better at this new thing. So you always kind of have to be like checking different things out. Which is not great for a production, because the production has deadlines and times where it's like, okay, this is due, that it needs to be done, and instead of doing like a tech freeze, the first person who's working on an AI-only movie is going to have like times during the production when they're like, okay, we'll unfreeze everything and then try everything again. Otherwise, it just ends up being dated or ends up being boring, right?
I'd also just point out one of the challenges is when you think about the data set of what you've done, right? So to take, for example, I did a show called The Gifted, which was an X-Men show on Fox, right? If I had been feeding in data, right? If I'd been feeding those scripts in, that was long before, AI was really a thing. But let's say I'd been feeding those scripts in. It would be able to discern certain aspects of the show. It would be able to understand, okay, this person talks this way. Matt, when he writes, overuses ellipses. Like I use a lot of ellipses, right? So, and writers make fun of me for it, but I'm sure ChatGPT or any LLM would do a great job of imitating my uses of ellipses and dashes, right? Or even knowing basically how long my scenes are, which is, that's a thing. But the question really is, how useful is that, given the fact that if you're doing a creative project that has any legitimate creative life, it's evolving as you go. Right? And it's also, in the case of what Mark and I are doing, it's evolving a lot in response to notes and priorities from a network and stuff like that. So in the first season of The Gifted, there was a whole set of things that they were trying to that the network wanted from the show in terms of what do the superheroes do and stuff like that. In the second season, This Is Us was a very popular show. And Fox really wanted everything to be This Is Us. Like literally everything should be This Is Us now. And so I was like, but I don't really know that it's a good idea to do a superhero show that's where the goal is to make everybody cry. And they were like, shut up, it's This Is Us. And I was like, okay, right? And if you want to go back and watch the second season of The Gifted, you will see a lot of things that This Is Us did, right? Now, when I think about how would I have used LLMs in that time, what did I actually do? I sat down with multiple episodes of This Is Us. I abstracted them using Microsoft Excel. I figured out the math of a This Is Us episode. I called the creator of This Is Us and said, hey, can I take you out to breakfast and talk you through how I think you write a This Is Us episode? He said, sure, that sounds like fun. And so I talked him through the math of a This Is Us, and he was like, yeah, you missed this. I was like, thank you very much. Can I use all of this on my show? It's a superhero show. No one will ever know. I just told all of you, but... And he was like, sure, no, who cares? And he was like, pitch me your story. It was like, he had some notes, and then I went in, and they were like, that's so great, it's just like This Is Us. I was like, I know, right? But now, I could, I would probably still do the Excel part of that. I'd probably still break down This Is Us using that. But it would be a lot simpler, and I could probably get more granular in terms of like, how does a This Is Us work, right? So that would be a really useful analytical tool. But my point is, the problem is now, let's say I feed in all of the information, right? All of the scripts for the first 2 seasons that got canceled after 2 seasons, but let's say we were doing a 3rd season, right? The LLM, I would have to give it a lot of information about like the studio notes and, oh, by the way, that one actor, total pain in the ass. Won't do scenes on Fridays, so we can't put them in anything. Like, this guy has a drug problem. So there's a lot of things that, so if I just trained it on the scripts, it wouldn't know that not to write scenes for those 2 actors who were really close when they were sleeping together and then they broke up and now you can't put them in scenes together. It would just start writing scenes for them and I'd be like, no, don't do that. A lot of calls from agents. So the point is, the creative project, even just, create, I joke about these things, but it's not just production. The creative project is evolving, right? And the show that it was in the first episode is not the show that it is in the 22nd episode. And training an LLM, it's naturally going to spit out some sort of average of everything you've done, right? So it's not that you couldn't find a way to make it useful, but in terms of, it would only be the most formulaic of shows that would yield easily to to creating a formula that always works.
So, I mean, is it fair to say that LLMs are conservative creatures? I mean, I'm calling them creatures, but I mean, just like in terms of like the way that they're thinking, that they're not likely to come out with outside the box kinds of concepts?
Well, you can tell it, you can say, give me concepts that are outside of the box, and it will do its level best. But outside of the box, once you get out of the box, there are a lot of directions you can go, you know, so it's kind of up to you to define what you mean by out of the box, which kind of gets back to as writers, we have formulas in our heads, right? We have our own prompts that we're giving our own brains. And understanding that prompt is, I think, more important than feeding a bunch of data into a machine so that it can spit out what you already did. It's understanding your own evolving creative process. What formula are you using? You know, you think about someone like Woody Allen, right? His jokes have a structure, right? He says something and then he undercuts it. You know, like he says a self-deprecating thing afterward. You know, like and he says it in a certain voice. You could master that formula, right? But also that formula evolves. And so I think yes, it is a creative, it is a conservative thing, but it can, to the extent that you're just giving it data and asking it to spit that data back out at you, all it can do is create a formula based on what it was given. And that's not really, that might be less useful in terms of coming up with something new and interesting.
So one of the things that obviously there's a lot of anxieties around AI in general, and studios are, very keen to see what AI can do for them in terms of obviously saving money, because that's what studios always want to do, and of course that translates to anxiety around people losing their jobs because that's how they save money, but what I'm curious about in terms of your experience of using it, as our keynote speaker noted, it's like, the AI can save you time. Can't save you money, can save you time. Now what you do with that time is then up to you. So what I'm hearing though, in terms of what you guys are talking about with LLMs, there's things that it can kind of short circuit, but there's still a ton of thinking that has to go on to crafting these ideas. What do you think its actual capacity is for saving time and money? Or is it just kind of a different path to creating your scripts?
Yeah, it's interesting. We can talk about like what is available and useful now versus shortly, right? You keep hearing like this is the worst that it'll ever be, right? Like it can only get better from here. So right now, what can it replace? People saying like, oh, the film industry is totally going bonkers right now because of AI. And I'm like, name a few jobs that have been replaced by AI, other than like maybe some readers, which is an issue, right? Because readers is how you make great writers, right? Like a lot of people start in Hollywood by being somebody's reader, right? So that's an issue. But like doing coverage and things like that, yeah, maybe some early concept art because the people are using Midjourney now, sure. That's or Stable Diffusion, something like that. But other than that, not really, right? Like eventually, yes, it'll replace writers' assistants and more than that. But I think what people say is like you have to think about the reinforcement learning from human feedback, which is going to be so prevalent here in this, is basically, yes, right now it's averaging out what everyone has always created, right? If you create a map of the best, craziest things are going to be on the outside of the map, what everyone, all of the shows that people created that were kind of like a single show are going to be over here, and then all the shows from the 90s are going to be there. But out of those, you can segment those into little areas and figure out what were the best of those shows and what were the worst of those shows. The ones that didn't take the guy out for breakfast and try to replicate it anyways and failed, right? And that's something, it's a mathematical function. The AI is going to be really great at that. So yeah, if you're making images, it's right now creating an average, but what happens when you tell the model, by the way, these images are the ones that won the Oscar for best cinematography. Make those instead. Like create a general vector that is in those directions, right? And those won the Oscar because they were impactful and meaningful. And because it's really freaking hard to do those kinds of things. But when you teach the AI model, like this is the general direction that humans are moving, that stories are evolving, this is what people love, then it's going to know what the next "this is us" is. It can guess what that is, right? With some human intervention in there for sure. But when that starts happening is when we have to be cautious about like who's telling our stories. Eventually, I do think that computers will be better than humans at telling our stories. Like, I don't think that in 10 years I'm going to want to be driven around by anybody in a taxi. I'm going to want to get into a self-driving car, right? Maybe if I have to go into a surgery, I want the surgery robot as opposed to some human who was drinking last night and is tired today and is bored or whatever. Am I not going to want to watch a movie that was made by a human because it's flawed, right? That's a conversation to be had. Or, do I want to watch AI racers drive around? Personally, I think I like to pretend like I'm Max Verstappen back there, that to know that there's a human doing that.
Go ahead.
So I would like to. So I would like to share for two parts. One part is in my studio, AI is not really a part of the production because since our learned, our experience, the best quality of work, it always came working with the best artists. So that's at the moment. That's the way. But people are really also at the same time, we're working on a long-term production projects. Usually take, the feature film take 2 to 5 years. So we used to work with the software, the tools, which we can trust and design for professional production. But people are really interested on to learn what's AI and what's curious in the future if they can really help for the production workflow, the pipeline. But another side, for my personal experience for my personal projects, which cross Asia, China, Asia, and US, all the clients, partnership, they're really interested to work with AI. And then there's more flexibility to work with AI by that side. So I just feel there's still a lot things going on. I mean, the technology is awaiting so quick, but it's more important as a filmmaker. Like you just said, the story, the creativity is most important. So that's why, people right now, we are always talking about, I look at this picture, that's an AI artist, that's AI art. So because they feel AI art style. That's because when you work on AI, you didn't really think really clear what your original idea is. And then when you work on that, you want to get something here, but AI give you something there, you feel, not really big different. Okay, I can go with there. And then it became AI leading your idea. So that's not the right direction. So when I'm working right now, working on the project right now, I usually think really clearly, put AI to another side. It's just thinking what's my idea will be, what it look like, and then to start using different tools to visualize it. And then that's why also now we are seeing the 100% AI generate picture to video, image to video that result wasn't the best quality. The best quality usually that's a live action plus AI. You have AI involved 30% to 10%. That's the best quality for right now. I mean, the technology is still going. It's interesting to see and then be ready for the future.
Yeah, I think that right now it's this evolutionary step, a major one, a leap in the creator economy. And look, creation, self-expression is built into human nature. It's what we want to do. We like to express what, any of, what makes us who we are. And I think that self-expression has a desire to get out. And what AI does is, there are to be like Matt and create shows and have them on the air, it's the NFL. There's very few people who can do that well and consistently. And I don't think that's going to change. There's the people who use LLMs at that level will just get that much better. But there's a democratization of art and artistic expression that I think is now available so that everyone can feel like they can create much better, more joyous art more quickly. And maybe those won't have, several seasons or $100 million budgets. That's fine, because I think that those people have a different, level of both sophistication and expectation for their art. Like, I started playing around with Udio, which is this amazing song generation app. And suddenly, I'm creating a song for my wife's anniversary. I don't think any of you guys are going to be hearing it anytime soon, but maybe it'll take off on TikTok. I don't know. June 24th, look out for it. So, but that's not what I'm trying to do with it. But there are people who are now, there's the Drake song that's out there that was created on Udio. So it's people who already have a skill set are going to be able to level up that much better.
Yeah, going off of that, in terms of job losses, and obviously it's a huge concern, but I think that we have to remember, with regard to how much money people are spending and what the stakes are, that it's an arms race between a bunch of people who are competing for eyeballs. And when the machine gun was invented, they didn't say, well, this machine gun can shoot as many bullets as 50 guys, so let's just send one guy out with one machine gun and send everybody else home. Everybody got a machine gun. They all got machine guns, right? And did wars get less expensive when you could just have the one guy and the one machine gun? No, they got much more expensive. It was just everybody got more ambitious. Everybody wanted to do more. And I think when I think about what is this going to do to Hollywood, I look back to the 90s when the first digital instruments were coming out, right? And before that, if you wanted a score, go back and watch an episode of Starsky and Hutch, right? Very simple score, right? Dee, nee, 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 right? It's just super simple, right? Or like a guy with a guitar and some drums. And there were studio musicians who were playing that, and it was composed, and there was somebody who transcribed it onto so there was sheet music for all the musicians. And then along comes artificial instruments. And so now somebody can play everything, okay? Now, in that transition, all those studio musicians lost their jobs, and the guy who transcribed the sheet music, he lost his job, right? It was the 70s, so it was probably a guy. But when you look at how much money goes into the production of scores, like that's gone up, right? That's now an episode of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. If they reboot that show, it's going to have a full orchestra. It's going to have an enormous amount of like John Williams-esque music, right? Because that's now possible. So in the arms race of Hollywood, I think that studios are very excited about saving money and being able to like fire a bunch of people. But I think what they're forgetting is that has literally never worked in the history of mankind. Not one time has a new technology come out and everybody was like, okay, we'll just like try not to do anything new so that we can all save money, right? And so I think it's what you're going to see. And actually, similarly, like once upon a time, before visual effects before everybody could have visual effects, like there were no, my show, The Gifted, right? There were no superheroes on television shooting lasers out of their hands and stuff. That was all technology, right? And it wasn't as if when the technology came out, everybody decided, okay, well, let's leave the superhero things in the cinema. They can do the superhero things, and in television, we'll still just do like car chases and all the stuff that television used to be good at. No, now we do superhero things on television too, and the arms race continues.
So I would love to hear from your perspective, from all of you. Obviously we've got four really smart people here who are in the thick of using AI tools and LLMs. and conversing, it's like it's just part of what it is now, just part of the way you work. It's part of the way you think. How does that compare to your peers? Do you feel like outliers in that regard, or are you seeing more people go down this path? I mean, there's kind of a generally held belief. It's like there's a lot of people who are using AI and only a few are admitting it. But I'm just curious, from what you're seeing around your friends and peers and what their perspective is.
I think to some extent at the professional level, there is a very hushed tone about using it. First of all, the new contract requires you to ask permission of your studio before you can actually use it. And a lot of studio policies are simply, it's not allowed. And I don't even know, that sounds very difficult to police, but also, Google's now integrating the Gemini into Google search, and so much of LLMs are essentially morphing into search and ways of research that I don't know how you can make that distinction, but right now at least I know a number of studio policies are literally like, you cannot touch it. If you do, it's because there might be a chain of title issue, and you have to sign a certificate of authenticity that you wrote this by yourself, and so there's a whole opening of liability in anything that you write, so people just aren't talking about it, and I think that's a problem that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, you're right. It's a question about you can't stop it, right? Coders and using any of the Copilot kind of things ran through the same thing where companies were like, you can't use Copilot because it might copy somebody else's code or whatever it may be, or because it might be trained on our code, so then our code ends up somewhere else. The data provenance is definitely something that needs to be talked about, needs to be fixed, needs to be realized, but eventually it will be fine. Eventually, synthetic data will be usable, and eventually these models will be great without any of the ethical issues. You can't stop people from using this. It's going to end up in Writer Duet in 2 weeks. The guy's right there. It's going to end up in Google. It's already in Google Docs, right? So and then there's also the question of some court cases are going to come out saying certain things, and some are going to say some other things. Likely going to end up in a Supreme Court, about whether or not you can both train the data and who owns the other side of it. But you tell me, I literally. When the first GPT-2 or 3 started coming out, I started, just saying let's see what happens. I tried to fill up the entire context window with the majority of my screenplay, and I just wanted one last final sentence, right, to be written by just the last thing, and it had to be this amazing last thing that the person says, and then cut to black, directed by Joe Penna, people crying, and I'm like, it needs to be great, so I hit enter, and I'm waiting for the model to load. So I'm just like, all right, I'll let that go. So then I go and take a shower, and my wife is like, we're in a drought, and I'm like, just a minute, I'm thinking about what this last thing is, and then I go on a walk, and I click it. I'm like, I run back, and I open up my laptop again, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to write this down. And the thing that the AI came up with was a little worse, but not by much. I would have gotten there way faster, right? Do I own that now? I would have gotten there, right? Can I not copyright my script because just the last little bit of it was done with AI, right? I think that's ridiculous, right? Now, conversely, I then got way too confident that GPT 3.0 was going to be great, so I tried to have it right, this other scene that I was having trouble with. So it started going off, with the two characters being the man being hey, my gosh, I'm so glad that this happened, and I wish we had met in Tokyo much earlier, and I do want to say that I love you. And then the woman saying I have a hard time saying that I do love you too. I'm like, stop, that's her dad. What are you doing, man? Yeah, it'll have issues like that. But within very specific contexts,
yeah,
it's very helpful right now.
Yeah. So yeah, I definitely feel the same. Most people I'm working with, they are basically like really interested on AI. They would like to learn and know more about it. So I think that's important because usually people scared with something they are not familiar, not used to deal with. So I think the education people about the knowledge about technology, that's really important thing. Like each AI filmmaker to work on. Also, I was thinking like how to see like AI artists and artists, there's no clear boundary for that. Like because since Adobe building in all the AI tools, Firefly, and also like Photoshop had a generate fill. So once anyone who has a computer install Adobe software, Photoshop, you basically are AI artist. So there's no clear boundary there. Then also at the same time, in different countries. So it's interesting in the past 1 month, I got a lot of friends from China, especially like studios. They came here to look for AI production team. Yeah, it was really appealing for the new technology for there. But there's some difficulty you use in a foreign country. For example, in China, it's so many software tools, website banned in China. So I was in China for a vacation last year, and then it cost me 2 minutes to download a picture from Midjourney. They're even more desire. They want to learn. They want to know about that. So I came here to learn. So I think that's definitely a lot of possibility for there. And also that's why we are thinking we need to just keep learning, experimental, and then share all the knowledge, for each other.
I'd just say quickly, there is an enormous amount of fear and anxiety and anger in the Hollywood community about AI. One of the strange things about it is when you hear the rhetoric around AI, it almost always follows a specific pattern, which is AI is utterly useless garbage that's going to take all of our jobs. And I'm like, you kind of have to choose one or the other. And then the other thing is like, people are constantly like, now you can write a script in seconds, and it's mediocre, and it's not very good, but the studios are going to want that. And I say to people like, guys, if shitty scripts are that valuable, we're sitting on a gold mine. We always have been, right? And the truth is, studios could always have gone to India and said like, hey, can you write me a script? It doesn't have to be very good, but I need it in like 3 days. And they're going to be like, yep, wait, we'll do that. Yeah, $500, right? And now you can have it for less money in a day. But again, I say they're always like, but it can do it so fast. And I'm like, have you met a studio executive? They take like months to read anything. Like, speed is not what they're good at, or that's not what they need. So but that's all of that said, there is an enormous amount of fear. And I've been saying to people for a long time, no one in Hollywood writers' rooms is going to use AI because it is wrong and evil. A lot of people are going to come back from the bathroom with very good ideas.
Okay, I'm going to open it. We've only got like about 10 minutes left, and I have a strong feeling that there will be questions. We've got a microphone here. Does anybody want to be first? We'll go down here, then up there.
Awesome stuff, guys. Thank you. So the biggest question that I have is that large language models right now are good at doing mediocre work at scale. So if you're doing mediocre work, like you said, AI is going to eat your lunch. But what happens when it's not doing such mediocre work anymore at scale?
I think that if this is a marathon, right, the first mile and the last mile are really hard. Like coming up with what's that inspiration you're going to write about. There's no AI. You can't type in, just give me a movie. It's got to come from somewhere. And so it needs somebody, and that's what I think is great, is like the creator economy. Whatever human has that idea that they want to evolve, that's what you can now get, the next 10 miles are going to be pretty fast. and those are all mediocre miles, my first drafts, you know. So if I can get through a bunch of those, and then I still got to run that another 13 miles to get to the end. And the last one is particularly hard, and really fine-tuning the script. That's probably where I spend most of the time. Is I already have something that's pretty good, but I need to make it great. I need to make it, you know, worthy of the actors and the show and your attention to watch. And so I think you're going to have to still need people for that last mile. At some point, it may, and you know, there's going to be like, yeah, first it's going to take over the script readers, then maybe some of the training that you had for staff writers. But at some point, there's a human who's behind all of that with the vision of what it is. And if everybody gets to do that and have their own creation, I think that's a valuable thing.
Yeah, also I feel the same way, especially like for redoing, if you want to do a really good story, for example, like because the biggest difference between AI and human, because human being has emotion connection, right? If you want a story, really good story, have a connection with audience, make them laugh and cry, you have to make by human. So AI cannot really do that, not there yet. And also for the visualize, I mean AI's LLMs, like they are like really good for like quickly visualize the idea, but it still like request the best tool is still request for human being involvement. So I think that will be great. For example, the difference between Suno and Udio. That's a Suno, you write a prompt and then you got the whole thing done. There's nothing changed. For Udio, you have like change the tone, like use the instrument. Like for people who has no professional background can make a music, but somebody professional, you can make a masterpiece. I think that's not meaningful for being for the AI tools.
I had a question back here.
Let me just quickly, just to really dive in on your premise, let us just say you are correct, and LLMs are now able to produce excellent work at scale, right? Because the models have just improved radically. So the question then for me is Citizen Kane an excellent movie? I think we can all agree, Citizen Kane, excellent movie, right? Now, an LLM writes Citizen Kane and releases it today. How well is Citizen Kane going to do? It is going to do exceedingly badly, right? The world does not want Citizen Kane right now, okay? So the question, I think, is even if we posit that it's going to improve radically, right? The question, there's still going to be this curation question of like, what does the culture want now? What's going to be really funny or interesting? Baby Reindeer, huge on Netflix right now, okay? Let's say Baby Reindeer came out 10 years ago. And let's just stipulate, Baby Reindeer is excellent. I loved it. I thought it was terrific, right? But if Baby Reindeer came out 10 years ago, everyone would be like, wait, he's dating a trans woman? What? Right? No, everything has evolved now. We're in a different place culturally where we are ready for that show. We are ready for that particular brand of excellence. And so I think that, yes, the LLMs can get technically better at doing certain things technically better, but I don't think we can say that there's an absolute quality called mediocrity, right, that exists and is timeless over all time, right? If you came out right now with, I mean, again, not to pick on Starsky and Hutch, but if you went back and you look at an episode of Starsky and Hutch now, nothing happens. Nothing happens in a Starsky and Hutch, ever. They just ride around and then they spend 10 minutes getting into a warehouse and then they punch each other into some boxes. That's every episode of Starsky and Hutch. But we loved it in the 70s. It was an excellent show, right? And so my point is there's no abstract quality called goodness that is timeless that an LLM can capture. It's always going to take human interaction to understand what is timeless, what works now, why is this moment for this, and that is, I think that is an irreducible human element.
You think that, I don't know, like, why can an LLM, why can an AI system learn to be timely? Why do you think that is reduced only to human beings, right? I think the LLM can watch everything and that has ever been watched, right? Read everything that has ever been read, and an LLM can be fed all the scripts that they said no to. So it's like, okay, so back in the 2000s, this would have hit. Back in the 2010s, this would have hit. All right, now it's 2020, this. 2025, like here's the graph of where stories are going, how stories are being told, and the pace of editing, and this and that, right? I think that it can learn. I might be wrong, right? But I think that it could certainly replace. It's just like driving, right?
Can it learn before I've paid for my house renovations? Because I really,
hopefully,
I just need like 5 years. So
5 years.
Just hold off.
I think maybe you might have it, right? But yeah, I think you're all right still. Like about the fact that like if somebody is amazing at writing stories, they'll be that much better quickly with LLMs, right? Because tools are going to start coming out that like writers can use, and then artists can use in a certain way. Already we're seeing that with Photoshop and all the visual stuff, right? But my concern is the same. I share the same concern that eventually there will be no human that can be as good as a model. I mean, literally, they can be watching it can be generated on the fly, right? Like if you're wearing your Apple Watch and you're watching a scary movie, it knows that you are more afraid of snakes than bears. So the big monster that it makes, it's a snake-like monster. And it knows when you're getting bored because it knows your heart rate and knows that you're kind of flopping around and then you're pulling your phone out. All of a sudden it catches your attention again, right? So I think that it can be, and for certain things, that can be okay right now for human beings. Like if Netflix wanted to make a version of my film where one of the scenes is in Paris versus Brazil versus the US because of whatever. When I grew up in Brazil and there was like one scene in a horror movie or like a destruction movie that just showed Christ the Redeemer statue crumbling over. My country's being destroyed, and yet my entire family would cheer, because there's that one scene where I connected with it the best because the filmmaker just wanted to, hit the whole world. But the AI models will eventually be able to do that with every single story. So I do have that concern.
What about like a combination of a bear and a snake?
That's the scariest one.
Because that sounds scary.
That's kind of like
Snake bear.
Yeah.
Someone is selling that in Cannes right now. Yes, up here.
Hi. I got the mic over here.
Oh, who's got it?
Hi. You actually kind of walked into my thought process for the question, but as I've been tracking AI's development, watching, like I have literary manager friends and kind of seeing how it's been progressing, my macro concern of how it destroys a lot of what we're working on kind of is my question, which is, if one of these AI systems scrapes the blacklist, in my opinion, they could catch current cultural tonality, and then AI could take away the ability of writing creatively to today's market. Like you're reverting to the past, but like when we track writers, a lot of it goes to the blacklist. So now the blacklist is released publicly every year, so they can't even stop it from getting scraped once it's out there. And now with Sora, could they just take Sora to the script the moment the blacklist drops and just make a visual version of it, put it on YouTube before the writer could even sell it? Like the text going so fast, I'm like even could AI steal your ideas right now? If I was like, I want Matt Nix's idea, make me a version of his show.
Snake bear's mine, dude.
But that'd be the threat, because when I deal with like writers, no one wants to take it there because that's the scariest thing. Say you're at Illumination and you're working on a Pixar or like an idea that could rip off Pixar, but then the animation companies are competing, but now it's AI going to war against companies. So like where does it go if AI can be your friend, but it also can be your enemy? It can also be the attacker for your company. It can also be the intel for your company. I can use Intel to compete against other management companies. I can use AI to go after other management companies. I can use AI to pull up Stanley Kubrick as a writer for my idea. I can use AI to write me the Bible off my baseline log line. So it's like It's going to allow a college student to be as good as the studios, but the studios are never going to pay as professional rates if they can pay a college student. And my mind kind of goes back to the money. At the end of the day, we can create everything in the world, but if they don't pay us, we don't have careers anymore. So then it's like the YouTube model on top of Netflix. So it's like a lot, but I was just wondering where you guys kind of sit within that too.
They said the same thing about YouTube, says the YouTuber, right? That movies are going to go away, that TV shows are going to go away. Sorry, Matt, you don't get to do Snake Bear. You know, like, but it became a different medium. You know, YouTube is a different, TikTok's a different medium than YouTube. Well, let's talk about YouTube Shorts. You know, like, it does democratize storytelling, but not in the way that people thought it would. They said the same thing about digital cameras. They said the same thing about radio, you know? And sure, like before, everybody, when they wanted to see acting, they went to a play. And then eventually they started listening to the radio. And therefore, not as many people went to plays. I think that there can be a new medium that arises from this that is going to be some sort of like, there's animation that is generated on the fly that is very personalized to your tastes and whatnot. You know, like it's like Bandersnatch times a million, right? And the question of ideas being stolen, whatever. Like we all have the same ideas, right? And in Hollywood, you know, we all see that 2 movies come out that are the same idea, and you can bet that there were like 10 other scripts, if not more, you know, that we all read in Hollywood that were, you know, going away.
By the way, it feels like you're trying to
thing.
take Snake Bear from me with this talking about that.
So, you know, when Snake Bear, directed by Joe Penna, it comes out, you know.
No, there's Bear
Come
Snake.
on!
There's Bear Snake, and then there's Snake Bear.
There's
I got
2
the
movies that got come out, right? And one of them is going to have AI, and that might be the better movie because it got made earlier, you know. And then when Matt Nix's Snake Bear comes out, because he didn't use Bear Snake, right?
But-
yeah, so yeah, it
But
does feel
the script
like,
is only one part of it, and you've got to, you know, people may change the way they screenwrite, just as once, you know, talkies came out and people wrote silent films in different ways. You may be writing in much more specific prompts, you know, like a lot of writers say, you know, you write for directors sometimes when you write in specific camera angles and things that sometimes, you know, you don't always do. But as we write in more of those, then an AI is going to be able to, you know, you can right now create a shot list, create very specific, you know, you can ask an LLM to create a shot list from your thing or create a lookbook. It's still several steps away from being able to create a film. And there's 4 million steps and creative decisions that go into every frame and hundreds of people involved. So the script is just the first blueprint.
Yeah. So yeah, I definitely agree with you. Basically for the idea, so is that still important, like for the original idea? That's why I know you guys upload the script on the ChatGPT, but I never done that because I'm scared of those. Also, for no matter I write a script or like work on the visual designs, I always control the last step by my hand. So it's not with the AI or Mid Journey. There must be, if I want to finish a design, I'm gonna individually each part generate by Mid Journey, but in the end, I put them together by my hand. So I control the last most creative part. That's one way. Another side, I'm feeling like combined to feeling like that's something is anime, or maybe think about more about like how can we use it to help us. Like for example, I'm a director. Like usually in Hollywood, or like it's not usually you want to be a director. It's gonna go through like many pitches and then face a lot of rejections, and then finally take a long time. You probably get a chance for directing opportunities. But actually, by now using AI tools, you can just in a few hours you can make a short film. You can direct a film every day. It basically like, actually you can find another way to train yourself, see that a low cost, a training, self-training and learning system. So I feel like it's more combined to always worry about how it gonna like attack me or like take something from me. Maybe we can think about more like how to better using it for us, helping us, help the creativity. So that sounds us.
Yeah, I just two things. One thing you said was, if you scrape the blacklist, can the LLM anticipate the next cultural development or conversation? And I don't actually think that's a solvable math problem, because I think you're like, what is the average? Like, let's think of like the two most exciting pieces of entertainment that are coming out, like either now or in the near future, right? Which would clearly be the average of Snake Bear and Baby Reindeer, right? What is the average of Snake Bear and Baby Reindeer? Like, those are both like exciting new cultural developments, but they're not in the same genre. They're not like, essentially the data set is not large enough, right? What makes the new movie or the new show the most amazing new thing? Well, it's not actually the average of scripts. It's everything that's going on in the culture, right? The reason that Civil War is a hit movie right now is not because there were a bunch of other Civil War-ish scripts that came out before. It's because our nation is in crisis, right? Like, that's why. And so it happened to hit at the right cultural moment. So I don't think that would be the concern so much. I think in terms of stealing ideas, yes, it is true. You could look at a script on the blacklist, and then you could try to have someone reproduce it and make it very quickly or whatever. I guess my response to that is, if I'm a studio, or if I'm in the business of making something, at the moment, and this could change, but at the moment, the script is not it wouldn't be worth it to me as a studio to like reproduce your idea with AI, et cetera, and with all of the attendant legal issues that would go along with that, et cetera, et cetera. So I think I'm not too worried about that in the near future, but I think in terms of LLMs generating the next interesting thing, again, one of us will be right and one of us will be wrong, but I think that we do have to remember, again, keynote speaker, it's all math, right? And it can be easy for us as humans to be like, well, once we know it's all math, that means all problems are solvable. But if you talk to a mathematician, that's not true. Like, there are chaos problems, there are mathematical problems that, they may have a solution, but it might take more than the life of the universe to solve it. And so I think, some of these questions of creativity and what is the next thing, yeah, it's theoretically solvable, but practically, NVIDIA will need to like pave the earth with chips before we can actually generate that script.
Something else to think about in this too, because we all wonder, like, how far can AI take us with this, and who knows? Maybe it's going to make that leap. But I've been to Sundance for the last 20 iterations of it, and in that time we have seen the rise of things like digital filmmaking. We have seen the rise of mumblecore. We have seen so many things that have come up in terms of like further democratizing, making it accessible to everybody to make films. And ostensibly, AI is going to continue doing that. But I'll tell you this, over the course of that, there's been some great films that have been made using that technology, but we have not seen an enormous swell of fantastic filmmaking that wasn't there before. It's like, if you look at what Sundance puts out, every year, the amount rises and falls a little bit, and some years are good, some years are great, some years are meh, and it's not so much about the technology. It's not so much, it's not about just the course, it's the execution and being tied into what is happening in the moment. Now listen, maybe AI is smarter than all of it and is going to make that different, but that has always been the case, that no matter how much it's been democratized, we still wind up with about, it feels like, the same amount of really great work. Because if it weren't the case, then we'd be seeing a ton of other great work that's popping up at other festivals, and there's good work that shows up there, but there hasn't been a flood of it.
Oh, you're right. It's right now the way that models are trained is next token prediction. It's gigantic batch sizes, which means that you're likely to just get the average, right? Like, hey, I take these two pieces of bread and I put some salami in the middle, and I'm gonna make it delicious. There can only be so many next words that come out. Probably gonna be sandwich, or something like that, right? So. Eventually, there will be better architectures that are a little bit more like the stock market, right? Stock market, you can predict. You're not trying to predict the average of. I don't care like the average of the past few days. I care about what's coming next. So and now AI models are way better than any quant, and any better than anyone being like, oh, you know what? It's about to hit this or about to hit that. You still need that human looking at it to make sure that you're not trading $1 quadrillion, down, but majority of it is that like trying to predict what's next. And if you look at what humans are into, there's a 30-year, fashion cycle. All of us olds are looking at what the kids are wearing nowadays and being like, you're gonna regret it. Don't, why are crew socks okay now? I totally got made fun of. I remember having to fold my sock over my shoe to pretend it was a no-show sock. But anyways, I could talk to that with my therapist. In the meantime, I also have to talk to them about like AI models having to replace me, I think, because eventually I think that it can hit, like just try enough, like throw enough up against the wall. And then if you almost have like another model that predicts what is going to be popular next, eventually you can guide the LLM with that one model, and it will make some sort of guess about what's next. And eventually, sure, like things that humans make can be something completely out of the way and totally different, right? That just happens to hit a nerve that we were all talking about that someone guessed. But I do think that eventually, AI models will be able to get better than a significant portion of humans at doing that. At least faster.
Yeah, I think I was about to say, it's like, we need to wrap, right?
Yeah, we're wrapping.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for this. This was totally fascinating. Thank you.